The man behind the counter lifted the typewriter cover the way someone lifts the lid of a coffin, slow and reluctant, as if he already knew what waited inside. Dust drifted up into the cold fluorescent light. The machine was an IBM Selectric, gunmetal gray, the kind that had not been manufactured in 40 years. And when the old repairman saw what had been hidden beneath the carriage, he stopped breathing for exactly 60 seconds. The young American who had brought it in did not notice at first. He was checking his phone, complaining about the cold Warsaw rain. But when he looked up and saw the old man's face, drained of all color, frozen like a photograph, he felt something shift in the air of the small shop. "Is something wrong with it?" the young man asked. The repairman did not answer. His hands, spotted with age and steady as surgical instruments, hovered over a small black device wedged against the inner frame. A device that should not exist. A device he himself had installed in 1974. Which city in the world are you watching this from right now? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you believe some secrets are buried for a reason, hit subscribe, because the truth this old man had hidden for half a century was about to bring 3 governments to the door of a typewriter repair shop in less than 2 hours. What did 50 years of silence finally reveal? The morning had started like every other morning in the 41 years that Tomasz Walewski had run his repair shop on Proźna Street. He was 81 years old, a small man, narrow through the shoulders, with a full head of white hair and a face that had folded itself into a permanent expression of mild patience. He wore the same thing every day, a gray wool cardigan over a collared shirt, dark trousers, leather shoes polished every Sunday evening. His customers, the few that remained, knew him as a quiet man who said little, charged fairly, and could resurrect machines that other repairmen declared beyond saving. They did not know anything else about him, because there was nothing else to know. Or so they believed. His shop was a single cluttered room, typewriters lining every shelf, the air thick with machine oil and ribbon ink. He made his coffee black, no sugar, in a chipped enamel cup older than most of his clients. He moved without hurry, because he had learned long ago that hurry was the enemy of precision, and precision was the only thing he had ever truly believed in. At 11:05, the bell above the door rang, and a young American walked in carrying the typewriter that would end 41 years of peace. His name was Daniel Brenner. He was 34, an attorney from Boston in Warsaw, to settle the estate of his grandfather, who had died 3 weeks earlier at 91. The grandfather, Walter Brenner, had been a career diplomat who served in a dozen embassies across the Cold War world. Daniel had never been close to him. There had always been something distant about the man, a sense that some part of him remained permanently elsewhere. Among the dusty furniture of a Warsaw apartment no one in the family had known existed, Daniel had found the typewriter, wrapped in an old wool blanket and placed in a wooden crate, as if it mattered. "I found this in my grandfather's apartment," Daniel said, setting the crate on the counter. "It's pretty old. I don't know if it even works. I was hoping you could clean it up. I'd like to bring it home." Tomasz set down his screwdriver and wiped his hands. He looked at the crate and something in his chest moved, a small cold thing, an instinct he had spent 5 decades putting to sleep. "Let us see what you have," he said. His English was excellent, formal and precise. He lifted the typewriter from the crate. It was heavier than it looked, and the moment his hands closed around its frame, a memory stirred at the base of his skull. An IBM Selectric, gunmetal gray, and his hands, which had not trembled in years, went very still. He knew this machine, not this type of machine, this machine. He had not seen it in 52 years, but he knew it by the shape of something essential that time cannot erase. There was a small scratch on the left side of the casing, a curved line like a question mark, that he himself had made with a slipped tool in the winter of 1974. There was the serial number, which he did not need to read because he had memorized it long before his own children's birthdays. And there was the weight, the particular wrongness of it, because of what he had placed inside it in a cold room in a building that no longer existed. He lifted the cover, and there it was, a small black rectangular device, no larger than a deck of cards, wedged into the frame beside the motor, wires threaded with a craftsman's care along the existing channels so that no casual inspection would ever find them. Coated now in 5 decades of dust, but intact, exactly as he had left it. That was the moment his face went white. Because that device should have been destroyed in 1975. He had been told they were all destroyed, every last one, melted to slag in an embassy basement that had since been demolished. He had been told this by men who lied for a living, and now here was the proof of the lie, carried in by the grandson of a man named Brenner. The name reached him like the sound of an explosion after the flash. Brenner. He looked at the young man's face, and now that he was looking, really looking, he could see it. The jaw, the set of the eyes. He had seen that face before, younger, across a table covered in documents that no longer officially existed. "Where did you say you found this?" Tomasz said. It was not a question. The patient softness had drained out of his voice. "My grandfather's apartment. He passed away last month," Daniel said. "Did you know him? Walter Brenner? He was a diplomat." Tomasz closed his eyes for one long moment. 52 years. He had built a life out of silence, brick by brick, and now a dead man had reached up out of the ground to knock it all down. "Yes," he said quietly. "I knew your grandfather, a long time ago. We were not friends. Sit down, Mr. Brenner. I am going to make us both coffee, and then I am going to decide how much of the truth you are old enough to hear." But the truth he was about to reveal would not stay inside the walls of that small shop. Within the hour, it would travel across the city, and then across the ocean, and the people it reached would not waste a single minute before they came. "That device," Tomasz said, setting the cover down as if it might detonate, "is a keystroke recorder. When this typewriter was in use, every key that was struck was registered, encoded, and stored inside that box. Every secret diplomatic cable, every classified report the operator believed was private. I built it with my own hands, and I installed it in this machine in the winter of 1974. I installed 41 of them that year, in typewriters bound for embassies your government believed were untouchable." He handed Daniel a cup. "I was an engineer. The spies were other people, better dressed, better paid. They gave the orders and took the credit. I built the machines." The silence was complete. Daniel stared at the frail figure in the gray cardigan and tried to fit the words into the shape of the person before him. "You're telling me you were a spy?" "I am telling you I was the most useful kind of nobody," Tomasz said. He had been born in early 1945, in the rubble of a country ground between two empires. His father killed in the uprising months before his birth. He was clever with his hands, and the state was always hungry for clever boys it could shape. By the 1960s, he was building bugs and microphones and transmitters for an agency with no name he was permitted to speak, the Polish service, and behind it, always the Soviets. He had a gift for the work that troubled him in the quiet hours, because the work was ugly and his gift for it was beautiful. And then, in 1973, they gave me the great project, the typewriters. No one suspected them. A typewriter is furniture, a tool. Everyone assumed what mattered was the transmission, the cable, the phone call. No one thought about the moment of creation, when a man sits down and types his most secret thoughts believing himself alone. That is the most vulnerable moment of all. That is when the truth is naked. He drank his coffee. It was the most successful operation of its kind in the Cold War, and almost no one ever heard of it, because the men who ran it made certain of that, and because the man who built it was supposed to disappear. What do you mean, disappear? In 1975, the operation was compromised. A Polish officer defected to the Americans in Vienna and began to talk. He did not know everything, but he knew there was a single engineer who had designed the entire system. They did not have my name, but they had my existence, and in this work, the existence of a man is the thread that, pulled hard enough, unravels everything. His voice dropped. My handlers had a choice. Extract me, or solve the problem more permanently. I was 30 years old. I had a wife. I had a daughter who was 4. And I understood, the way one understands these things without being told, that I was being measured for a grave. They were going to kill me, and they would have, except that someone warned me. Someone on the other side, an American who decided I should not die. The pieces were assembling themselves in Daniel's mind, and he did not like their shape. An American. Your grandfather, Mr. Brenner, Walter Brenner, the man who owned that machine. He saved my life in the winter of 1975, and his typewriter has now, 51 years later, walked back into my shop in the hands of his grandson. What Daniel did not yet know was that his grandfather had not saved Tomasz out of kindness. There had been a price, and the recordings inside that black box were the unpaid half of a bargain made half a century ago. If you were building Soviet devices and he was an American diplomat, you were enemies. Why save you? Because your grandfather was not only a diplomat, he was CIA and had been since before your father was born. The diplomatic posts were his cover. He was the man who recruited the defector who nearly got me killed, and the man who afterward decided my death would be a waste. He found me 3 days before I was to die, and he sent a message. They are going to kill you on Thursday. I can offer you another way. He named a place, a church, the confessional of all things. The Cold War had a sense of humor when it bothered to have anything at all. He had gone. A man being measured for a grave grasps at anything. A calm American voice came through the screen, and it laid out the terms of his survival. He wanted the architecture of the system, how the devices worked, how they encoded the keystrokes, how the recordings were read. Espionage is not about morality, Mr. Brenner. It is about capability. He did not want to expose the program. He wanted to own it. And I gave him everything, every schematic, every frequency, the names of the men who were going to kill me. In exchange for one thing, not money, not asylum. I asked him to make me dead, officially, permanently. So the men hunting me would stop, and I could become a nobody. A repairman, in a quiet shop, in the city where I was born. He agreed. On a Wednesday, the engineer Tomasz Kowalczyk died in a fire in his apartment. The body was unrecognizable. There were dental records, because your grandfather's people were thorough, and a corpse can be arranged. My wife was a widow. My daughter was fatherless. For the first time, something cracked in his calm, a hairline fracture in 50 years of stone. They still think I am dead. My wife mourned me, remarried, died in 2009. I sent flowers to her funeral with no name on the card. My daughter is 55 now, a pediatrician in Krakow. She believes her father died in a fire when she was 4. And she is correct, because the man who was her father did die that day. I have watched her from a distance for 50 years. I have never spoken to her, because the moment I do, I make her a target, and I undo the only thing I ever truly accomplished, which is keeping her safe by staying dead. The story had become larger than espionage. A man who had murdered himself to save the people he loved, and spent 50 years living in the grave he had dug. And it was not over. The typewriter was still on the bench. Why had Walter Brenner kept it? If you gave him everything, if the program was over, why keep a listening device for 50 years? That is the question that should frighten us both. Tell me, your grandfather, in his last years, was he afraid of anything? Daniel started to say no. Then he stopped. He had a safe in Massachusetts. He became obsessed with it, checked it constantly, installed too many cameras. My mother thought it was paranoia, but he was sharp until the end. Sharp and scared. He told my father once that there were things he should have destroyed and didn't, and that if anyone ever came asking about Warsaw, the family should say they knew nothing. We thought he was rambling. He was not rambling. He was warning you. Tomasz gestured at the machine. When your grandfather took my devices in 1975, he did not give all of it to his own agency. A man like Walter does not give away leverage. He gave them enough to claim a victory. But he kept this machine, and I believe he kept it running. He understood what it could do because I had explained it to him myself, kneeling in that confessional. I would wager that Walter Brenner used this machine to record his own secrets, his own operations. The things he was never supposed to write down, the agents he ran, the operations his own government would deny to this day. He typed them onto the one machine whose secrets only a dead man could read. It was his insurance, his confession, his final card, held against the day someone came for him. The full horror landed on Daniel at once. The typewriter was not a relic. It was a vault, and inside it were the deepest secrets of a CIA officer that powerful people would still kill to protect or to possess. "We have to destroy it," Daniel said, standing. "No." The authority in Tomasz's voice froze him. "Sit down. You carried this through the streets of Warsaw this morning in an open crate from an apartment that is being watched. The moment your grandfather died, certain people began waiting for exactly this, for someone to find the machine. And you have just pulled the thread. They know it is here, or they will, very soon. And when they come, the recordings inside that box will be the only thing standing between us and a very quiet, very final solution to the problem of two men who know too much." As if summoned, Daniel's phone buzzed. An unknown American number. 11 words. "We need to talk about your grandfather's property. Do not move it." He turned the screen toward Tomasz. The old man read it, closed his eyes, and said, very quietly, "It has begun." "Who are they? The CIA?" "Perhaps. Your grandfather's people, the ones who clean up what career officers leave behind. They will want the recordings because they contain operations they have spent 50 years denying. But understand the geometry, Mr. Brenner. The recordings were made on a Soviet machine, by a Soviet device. The Russians have spent decades trying to learn what your grandfather took from them. If they learned the engineer is alive and the master machine still exists, they would move heaven and earth to reach this shop. And the Poles, my own people, would want it too, if only to keep it from everyone else. 3 governments, all with a reason to want that box, and all with a reason to want the 2 men in this room silent. Now do you understand why we cannot simply burn it?" He crossed to a cluttered shelf and cleared away the dead machines, and behind it was a small steel door painted the color of the wall. He produced a key from a chain around his neck, and inside was a reader. An old but lovingly maintained device with a slot size to accept the magnetic medium inside the black box. "You kept a reader. A man who built the lock keeps the key, even when he tells himself he threw it in the river. I told myself for 50 years I would never use it, but I never destroyed it either. Some part of me always knew one of the typewriters would come home. If they are coming for the recordings, we must know what they contain before they arrive. Help me. Your hands are younger." Together they freed the black box from the frame. Tomasz cleaned the contacts, inserted the magnetic medium, attached a small speaker, and flipped a switch. After a moment of static, a voice filled the dim shop. An American voice, older, tired. And Daniel went rigid because he knew it. It was a voice that had read him stories as a child. It was Walter Brenner, speaking from beyond the grave. "If you are hearing this," the recording said, "then I am gone, and the machine has found its way to the one man who can read it. Tomasz, old friend, I always knew you weren't really dead. A repair shop on Prozhna Street, very you." A dry sound that might have been a laugh. "I kept the typewriter because I am a coward and a patriot, and in this work those are often the same. I recorded the truth on it. The things my own people would erase me for. Operation Northwind, the Vienna accounts, what we did in '79 that the official history will never admit. It is all here. I kept it as a shield. As long as it existed, and they couldn't read it, they couldn't touch me. But I'm dead now, and that protection dies with me unless—" The recording crackled, then returned, urgent. "They will come for it. Both sides, all sides. Whoever holds it when they arrive is a dead man, unless he is smart. So here is what I have done. I have not left the recordings only on this machine. I have made copies with people I trust, set to be released if I die under unusual circumstances. The machine in your hands is not the weapon. It is the proof that the weapon exists. Show them you have it, that you can read it, that the dead man's hand is still on the table, and they will not dare move against you. The truth is only safe when everyone knows you are willing to tell it. I'm sorry to pull you back into the cold. I could think of no one else who would understand. Goodbye, Tomasz. Forgive me, or don't. We never did deserve forgiveness, men like us." The reader hummed into silence. The dead man had reached across 50 years and handed them a live grenade, and a single fragile chance to survive it. "Copies," Daniel whispered. "He said there are copies." "Then your grandfather was, to the end, the most dangerous kind of man. One who has prepared his own funeral so thoroughly that killing him accomplishes nothing. He has given us a weapon. But a weapon is only as good as your enemy's belief that you will use it. When they come, we will have one chance to convince them we are not two frightened men they can erase, but the holders of a key that brings the whole house down. We cannot run. We cannot hide. We stand very still with our hand on the trigger and make them believe." What followed was the longest 40 minutes of Daniel's life. Tomasz photographed everything: the device, the reader, the interior of the machine, and had Daniel record a portion of Walter's confession onto his phone. "Send it," he said, "to 3 people who are not in this country and will not hesitate." Daniel chose a journalist he had once interned for, a lawyer friend in New York, and his own father in Massachusetts. He wrote a single line above the photographs and the audio. "If I do not call by sundown Warsaw time, send everything to every outlet you can reach." He sent it 3 times, watched the confirmations appear, and felt the vertigo of doing a thing that could not be undone. "It is done," Tomasz agreed, and he looked suddenly very old and very calm. "When your grandfather offered me my death, in that confessional, he asked me one question first: whether the work had been worth it, whether everything I had stolen had purchased anything a decent man could look at without flinching. And I told him the truth. I said no. That our 2 empires had spent the best years of a generation listening to one another whisper in the dark, and nothing we learned had made a single human being freer or less afraid. I told him we were 2 armies of ghosts, haunting each other across a wall, and that I was tired of being a ghost. And do you know what he said? He said, 'So am I.' That is why he saved me. Not for the schematics, because I had said aloud the thing he was never permitted to say." At 1:47 in the afternoon, the first car arrived. A black sedan that pulled to the curb and did not move. 2 minutes later, a second. Then a third, sealing the narrow street. The geometry was unmistakable. Prajna Street had become the focal point of forces that did not have names you could say aloud. A figure emerged from the first car, a man around 60, silver-haired in a long black overcoat, holding an umbrella with the unhurried confidence of someone who had never been the one who was afraid. He crossed the street, stopped at the door and spoke without knocking. "Mr. Brenner, Mr. Walewski, my name is not important. I represent people who have an interest in the property you are examining. I would like to come in. May I?" Tomasz looked at Daniel. He saw in the young man's set jaw the ghost of Walter Brenner, the same stubbornness. "Remember, we are not frightened. We are holding the key. Let me speak." He drew the bolt and opened the door. The man stepped inside, bringing the cold and the smell of rain. His eyes moved once around the shop and sharpened when they found the reader. He understood what it was. "So, it's true. You can read it." He looked at Tomasz with something almost like respect. "We weren't certain you were alive. The file said otherwise. But the file always says otherwise. You're the engineer, Kowalczyk. I am a man who repairs typewriters. The engineer Kowalczyk died in a fire in 1975. You may check the file." "I've read the file. Let's not waste time. The machine, the device, the recordings. They contain material a number of parties consider extremely sensitive. My principals would prefer it secured. Permanently. You can imagine what that means for the 2 of you. Or we can be reasonable. You give us the device and your silence, and you both go home and forget this happened. No one needs to come to harm. Choose cooperation." It was a smooth offer, and Daniel felt a desperate impulse to accept it. But Tomasz did not move. "No," he said. The man tilted his head. "No?" You have made an error in your arithmetic, and it is the same error your kind always makes. You believe the two men in this room are the variables and the device is the constant. You have it backwards. The device is a box. What matters is the information, and the information is no longer in this room. Photographs of the device, recordings of Walter Brenner's confession, in his own voice, naming Operation Northwind and the Vienna accounts and the matter of 1979, which I see by your face you recognize. It has gone to a journalist, a lawyer, Mr. Brenner's father, and it goes much further if certain telephones do not ring by sundown. He took a single step forward, an old man in a grey cardigan facing down a force that had toppled governments. Your principles sent you to clean, but you cannot clean what has already spread. Walter Brenner made copies, real ones, held by people you cannot find and cannot frighten, set to publish the moment he died under suspicious circumstances. He has been dead 3 weeks. The clock is already running. The only question is whether you add 2 more bodies to a story that will be told regardless, and guarantee it is told as loudly as possible. Or you walk back to your cars and tell your principals the dead man planned his funeral too well, and the wisest move is to leave us alive to bury it. The silence was total. The man studied Tomasz, and his empty face betrayed, for a fraction of a second, something real. The recalibration of a professional who has realized the board is not arranged the way he was told. "Show me," he said. "The confession. Play it." Daniel pressed play, and Walter Brenner's voice filled the shop again, strong and dead and damning. The man listened, and his face grew very still, and when it reached the part about the copies, the dead man's hand still on the table, he raised one hand, and Daniel stopped it. Enough. He was quiet now. He really did it. The old bastard built a dead man's switch out of his own confession. He looked at Tomasz with something almost like admiration. "You knew him. He saved my life once. It appears he has done so again." The man reached slowly into his coat, and Daniel's heart stopped, but the hand emerged with only a phone. He stepped to the door and made a call in a low voice, in a language Daniel did not recognize, his eyes never leaving Tomasz. 90 seconds. When it ended, he straightened, and he did something neither of them expected. He gave Tomasz a small, formal nod, the kind one soldier gives another across a line. "The machine stays with you. The recordings stay where they are. My principals have no further interest in this property, and they trust you have none in publicizing it beyond the arrangements the late Mr. Brenner already made. Those will be honored by silence on both sides. It is the only offer, and it will not be repeated." He glanced at Daniel. "Your grandfather was the most difficult man I ever worked against. I mean that as the highest compliment my profession permits. Go home. Grieve him. Say nothing." He looked at Tomasz one final time. "Rest well, Mr. Walewski. The file was wrong. You were the best of them. That's why they wanted you dead." He opened his umbrella and walked back across the narrow grey street, and one by one the 3 cars pulled away and dissolved into the rain, until Prajna Street was only a street again, and the 2 men inside the shop were only an old man and a young one, listening to their hearts slowly remember how to beat. For a long time neither spoke. Then Daniel sat down heavily, put his face in his hands, and his shoulders shook. Tomasz put the water on to boil, because that is what you do in the aftermath. The small, ordinary gestures that prove you are still alive. He pressed a cup of coffee into the young man's hands. "Is it actually over?" "For today. Perhaps for longer. Your grandfather built his trap well. As long as the copies exist, the truth protects us by remaining ready to be told. It is the strange logic of this world, Mr. Brenner. The secret is safest when it is most willing to stop being a secret." Daniel looked at the small white-haired man who had built the most successful listening operation of the Cold War, and then murdered himself to escape it, and spent 50 years repairing typewriters 2 streets from where it began. "What happens to you now?" "I repair typewriters, as I have for 41 years. Nothing has changed. That is the gift your grandfather has given me, the same gift twice, the right to remain no one. People sneer at being content, but I have seen what happens to men whose names go on walls. I built devices to record their secrets. There is more peace in a quiet shop on a grey street than in all the glory in the world. We are not so different, the priest and the spy. People bring us their darkest things, and we keep them, and we carry them to the grave. I have been a confessor for 50 years. I simply did not know until today that the last confession would be his. Daniel stayed in Warsaw 4 more days. He did not tell his father what had happened, only that the apartment had been cleared, and there was nothing of value, which was a lie, the first of many, the inheritance of every family touched by this work. On the morning he was to fly home, he came to say goodbye and found the old man at his bench repairing a student's typewriter, his hands moving with their old precision. "I want to do something for you," Daniel said. "It doesn't seem right that you should just go on alone with no one knowing, after everything." Tomasz set down his screwdriver. "There is one thing, though you may refuse, and I will think no less of you." He picked up a small creased photograph from the bench, a young woman holding a little girl with serious dark eyes. "My daughter, the pediatrician in Krakow. I told you I never will speak to her because it would put her at risk. That was true when I was a secret men wished to kill for. But the equation has changed. Your grandfather, in his terrible cleverness, has made me safe by making me useless. And I am 81 years old. I do not have so many years left in which to be content." He set the photograph face up in the lamplight. "I will not contact her. I cannot bear the cruelty of it, to tell a woman of 55 that the father she buried as a child has been alive all this time, nearly 300 kilometers away, repairing typewriters. It would not be a gift. It would be a wound. But if, after I am gone, you were to find her, to tell her gently that her father did not die in a fire, that he did a great wrong and spent his life trying to put it right in the only way left to him, that he loved her every day from a distance and stayed away only to keep her safe, that he was at the end content. If you would do that, then I think I could repair typewriters for the rest of my days with a very quiet heart." Daniel took the old man's hand. It was steady and warm and impossibly strong. "I'll find her. I promise. I'll tell her everything." "Not everything," Tomasz said with the ghost of a smile. "Some secrets a confessor keeps even from the family. Tell her the part that is true and kind. Leave the rest in the grave with the engineer. He does not need it any more." 3 years later, when the letter came from Krakow informing him that Tomasz Walewski, beloved fixture of Proźna Street, repairer of typewriters, had died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, Daniel Brenner boarded a plane. He went first to Proźna Street, where the shop stood shuttered and dark, a handwritten note in the window from a neighbor mourning the kind, quiet man who had fixed her grandmother's typewriter for free. And then he drove to Krakow and found the clinic, and waited among the coughing children until the last patient had gone. And then he knocked on the door of a woman of 58 with serious dark eyes and said, "Dr. Kowalczyk, my name is Daniel Brenner. You don't know me, but I knew your father, and I have something to tell you about how he really lived, and how he really died, and how, every single day, in a way you could never have known, he loved you." And she let him in. And outside the light was failing over the old city, and somewhere a church bell rang the hour, the way church bells had rung over confessions and secrets and the buried sins of a hard century for 1,000 years, and would go on ringing long after every last keeper of those secrets had carried them, at last, into the silence they had earned. What would you have done in that shop on Proźna Street, holding a dead man's confession with 3 governments at the door? Would you have run, or would you have stood still? Tell me in the comments, and if you believe the quiet ones, the forgotten ones, the people history tried to erase, deserve to have their stories told, then subscribe. Because there are more of them out there than you could ever imagine. There always were. And someone finally should remember.